We chose the title Thinking About the Challenges for Leaders in the NHS, but it's particularly appropriate when I see the snowstorm that's brewing outside. How many people in the room have heard of William Edwards Deming? That's a relief. Good, you're in the right conference, because I guess if people came to a AQuA conference and hadn't heard of Deming, you were possibly struggling. He's one of the founding thinkers of quality improvement, as people probably know. He was recognised much more overseas than he was in his own land. He was a prophet who wasn't really recognised in his own country till the very end of his life. Hugely influential on the development of quality improvement systems in Japan, clearly, Toyota and others. And he wrote this book towards the end of his life. Actually, it was published in 1986 when he was 86, Out of the Crisis. And the crisis that Deming was talking about was the crisis of American manufacturing, because imports of Japanese and other goods were much higher quality and at lower cost, largely as a result of the application of Deming's methods. He said a couple of things that I think are quite interesting for the NHS today in that book. The only survivors will be companies, trusts, hospitals, community services, with constancy of purpose for quality, productivity and service. And sadly, CQC and NHS improvements aren't with us this morning, but I kind of feel this latter quote is perhaps something for our politicians and inspectors and regulators. The timid and the faint-hearted and people that expect quick results are doomed to disappointment. When people think of Deming, they often think about statistical process control or plan, do, study, act cycles. But actually when you read his work, what he was arguing was that quality improvement is more cultural than technical. And he actually, in Out of the Crisis, framed his 14 points of management, and what he was really talking about was a failure of management and leadership in US manufacturing. And some of the quotes I think fit perfectly with Chris's introduction. Deming was very much of the view that you can't inspect quality in, it has to come from inside, a burning passion to improve. And he also said fear drives out improvement. So getting the culture right, where everybody can give of their best, is absolutely critical. What I'm going to do over about the next 20 minutes or so is pick up this point about the sense of urgency. It was a word that was on one of Chris's closing slides, and talk about the case for improving quality. I'm going to do those things pretty briefly, because I think most people in the room probably recognise those, and Chris has encapsulated it well. What I find all the time when I talk to organisations is they say, we know this is needed, we can see examples of other organisations that have been successful on the journey, but how? Practically, what do you do? And where do we start? What are the first steps we should take? And that's the work that we've been doing within AQuA to develop our framework for building a system and culture for continuous improvement. So I'm going to spend most of the time on that, but I am going to end with some thoughts about the kind of leaders that we need at every level in the service to carry that work forward, and perhaps a couple of reasons why we might have hope at the end. As Chris knows, he and I have worked together in the past, and for a while in the Department of Health, where a civil servant colleague came up to me one day and described me as a relentless optimist, and I was really pleased. And I realised he didn't mean it as a compliment, but it was a bad thing to be. So we're going to end with some optimism and hope if we can. So why do we need a sense of urgency? Well, because the NHS is bust, basically. We've had our usual 4% increase in demand. I actually think it's getting a bit more than that because of increasing acuity and complexity of patients, whilst funding has gone up by around 1%, and we've had 8 years of that. And that's starting to play out in the public perception of health services. I noticed recently published survey saying that satisfaction with general practice services is at the lowest, I think, for many, many years. And at any other point in the electoral cycle, this would have been a major political issue. I have to say, whilst I think the NHS and social care, particularly social care, need a sustained increase in investment, I'm not sure we're going to get that anytime soon. I think when you look at the economy, you look at politics, you look at the way Brexit is dominating the agenda, it's hard to see in the short term where that investment is going to come from. And one response of these in the NHS is to shrug our shoulders and say, well, we can't do anything then because the resources simply aren't there. But we need to recognise the resources out there, and colleagues at the King's Fund, the Health Foundation and other places are doing a great job of making out the case for more investment. But actually what we then need to do is redouble our efforts to make the most of what we've got. And I see everywhere, I'm sure you do, I sit these days as a non-executive director on a hospital foundation trust. I've done many years as a chief executive. Was with some staff from our health records departments yesterday. And when they were talking to me about the frustrations in their job, I'd say 30% of their time was rework, was dealing with errors in another bit of the process, was duplication. And that sense of waste is hugely frustrating for staff, and it's not a good use of taxpayers' money. So I think there are things that we can do to improve, but it's difficult. It won't happen overnight, and we need to get going. We need to start now if we're not already on this journey. So what's the case for improvement? And Chris has made this very eloquently, so I shall be very brief on this. There's lots of emerging texts now. There's a really good evidence base in all the sectors. If you look at pharmaceuticals, if you look at tech, if you look at the service sector, if you look at heavy manufacturing, I don't know a single leading business that doesn't use improvement method and doesn't actively engage frontline staff in using those methods. And authors like Paul Bate and Maureen Bussignano and Richard Bowler are describing how some of the leading healthcare organisations across the world are doing the same thing. And Chris has already talked you through the lessons from reforming the NHS from within. This sense that compliance won't get us there. We need a commitment to really improve and to do it for ourselves, as some of these leading organisations are. A slightly different montage, Chris, I noticed, than the one you have, to other organisations as well, correct here. The point that Chris didn't make, and I did just want to bring out in this opening section though, is I think all the time we get into a complex, difficult discussion, especially with frontline staff, about are the board really interested in quality? Is quality the priority? Or isn't money the priority because we've got to save money? Now actually, I prefer, people familiar with the Institute of Medicine definition of quality in the US, the six-fold definition. So safe, effective, timely, patient-centred, equitable, but also efficient. And I think that should be a key part of the definition of quality. Every pound that we waste isn't available for the next patient that comes along. And this was a slide that Jim Easton, when he was running the AQuA programme, used to use. And what he was really saying was, we really need, as improvers, to focus all our efforts on that bottom right-hand box as you look at it, that sweet spot, where if we can redesign the processes to take the waste out, so those health records clerks aren't spending 30% of their time doing rework and chasing errors, they're going to have a more satisfying job, the patient's going to get a better service, and we're going to get a better use of taxpayers' money at the same time. So I'm talking really today about improvement, quality improvement method, but as a way of improving the whole bottom line of the business. Clinical outcomes for patients, patients' experience, health, and the use of resources. Just a word about AQuA then. How many people in the room know what AQuA is? So about a third. So we've got some AQuA members I can see sat at the front. So for those who don't, we are a bit unusual. We are an NHS organisation based here in the northwest of England, and we are a membership organisation, member-owned and led. We have 68 NHS organisations in the northwest, both commissioners and every type of provider who pay us a membership fee to help us work with them to improve quality. And we now also have a range of non-member customers across the NHS in England and indeed in Scotland and in Wales as well. And a number of colleagues might be here today who want to chat more about what we're doing. And we decided to move forward with this framework because we observed across the organisations we worked with a lot of enthusiasts for quality, a ward manager, a community matron, a psychiatrist, who really wanted to get hold of QI method and help their service become better. But they were often disconnected, discrete projects, isolated individuals, who actually then found that they struggled to apply the learning when they got back to their organisation because there wasn't a supportive culture and there wasn't a system that enabled them to use that learning for the benefit of patients. And so the idea behind this framework was, how can organisations work to put those those things in place to do the kinds of things that the Young Shuppings and Salford Royals of this world have done. And it's a 5-domain framework. I'm going to quickly talk us through each of those elements: vision, leadership and culture, capability, developing an operating system, and aligning support services. And in the breakout sessions later, my colleague Leslie Massey, who co-authored the report for me, is running a breakout session where we're going into a bit more depth, because what we're also doing, it's in development stage, is developing a self-assessment tool, a diagnostic that organisations can use to say, where are we on our journey? Have we just started with this, or have we got everything working perfectly? And then to develop a range of support offers that help people improve against each domain. The framework has been developed with providers in mind, but I think commissioners could really incentivise its use. And I absolutely recognise the move towards systems. One of my other roles, I chair the Healthier Wigan Partnership, which is an emerging accountable care system here in the northwest of England. I don't yet see any system that is ready to do this work on a systems basis. I think we'll get there. I think some people will get there over the next 2 to 3 years. But I think we need the building blocks in place within organisations so that we can then spread this work out to systems. And I actually think developing a common improvement method and training staff from different sectors in it will be a really great way of moving the culture onto a culture of whole system and working. And I recognise this will not be easy. Boards have huge pressures on them, frontline staff have huge pressures on them. But something, again, on terms of hope and optimism, and I'd hoped that colleagues from NHS Improvements and CPC would have been here. They clearly can't make it because of the weather. But both NHSI and CQC are now strongly encouraging this approach, and I'll say a little bit more about developing people improving care at the very end of my remarks. So let's start with vision. Not just vision, but vision and strategy and the plan. And that needs to be a long-term vision. It's not an annual plan. It might be an annual series of goals, but actually the evidence is it's a 3 to 7 year journey before you start to see transformation across an organisation as a whole. You can get pockets of improvement quicker than that. And within it, I think, needs to be a few big, bold areas. That's certainly what Salford set out to do. But in true improver style, we put robust measures on those. They're not arbitrary aspirations, they are things that we are determined to deliver and we can measure them. And there's a delivery plan, and that delivery plan will require investment. I'll come back to that. And finally, you've actually got to get people to want to get out of bed at 5 o'clock in the morning to do it. I don't see many people getting out at 5 o'clock in the morning to go, woo, I've got an assurance meeting, fab, or I'm preparing for an inspection, but I'm owning my improvement project and I'm making things better for patients. I've known a lot of staff who get out of bed at that time in the morning. Martin Luther King, his famous I Have a Dream speech. A former colleague of mine, Professor Aidan Halligan, sadly no longer with us, used to use this slide all the time. And Aidan used to say, if Martin Luther King had worked in the NHS, he would have said, I have a strategic planning framework. Not quite the same, is it? So, a vision and a strategy, but one that will appeal to the heart as well as the head, that will engage people, that will motivate them, want them to move forward. This is probably for me the most important of these 5 domains. They're all important, they interrelate, but this is all about leadership and culture. And I don't just mean a few people sat around the board sitting at a table, I mean leaders at every single level. And indeed, those health records labs I met yesterday, when they were talking about my boss, my leader, they meant the band 4 supervisor. That's who they meant. And those are the people who we need to inspire and infuse and develop. And that culture needs to be one with patients and families right at the heart of it, and that then reaches out and inspires and engages staff. This might be a little unfair, actually it doesn't happen in any of your organisations, but one or two of the ones I've worked in. If you have a problem in the intensive care unit, for example, as I did once when I was running Bolton Hospital, what you typically do is get a load of people who don't really understand the problem called managers. They go off to a boardroom away from the problem. You deprive them of data. They all speculate and tell anecdotes. They make a decision through moral box or plagia. Any Greek scholars? So I mean It's domination by a single loud voice. And that voice might come from different places in the organisation. That is not an improvement culture. So leaders in an improvement culture work in a very different way. They're fully engaged frontline staff. They're the people who understand the problems. If we don't involve them in getting to the solutions are unlikely to be the best ones and certainly won't be sustainable. In lean terms, we talk about going to the gemba, getting out into the actual workplace. The occasion I talked about at Bolton Hospital, I remember we all got out of my office, we warned them we were coming, and went to the intensive care unit and had a look and chatted to staff and came up with a very different picture of what the problem was. We use data and we use evidence, we use a rigorous improvement method, and we work through those multiple cycles of plan, do, study, act to get to the right kind of solution. That's the way leaders work and what the culture is like in a true improvement organisation. And to do that, we need to build capability. This is where the investment comes in. We need to train staff at every level, including the board, including senior leaders, to use improvement method. And we need to support leaders to become coaches and role models of the staff doing the improvement work. The other thing we're doing within AQuA is we have half a dozen lived experience affiliates. I think we've got one in the room today. These are people, patients, mostly patients who've lived with their condition for a very long time, who have an interest in improvement and work alongside us to help shape our programmes. The organisations that I see at the best have patients and families on their improvement teams. I think I heard in the breakfast session, those who were here, I heard Trish Woodhead say, when you've got a patient sat there, it's quite hard to say, we can't do that, it's too difficult, there isn't a problem, when the patient is saying there is a problem. And within AQuA we have a skills escalator model, thinking about how we train staff and support that training at every single level. Anybody in the room been to Jönköping in Sweden? A couple of people. So health warning, the Swedes don't pronounce it like that, right from the northwest of England. So when I say it, it comes out as Jönköping. Jönköping is a county council in Sweden that has the highest quality at the lowest cost, and they've been at this for over 20 years. This is Kultura. It's their education centre, but it's much more than an education centre. And Paul Watolan from Dartmouth and IHI described what they do as this. If you go to Jönköping and you talk to a radiographer or a nurse or a doctor or the chief executive, everybody says to you, I have two jobs, to do my job and to improve my job. Everybody in the organisation is trained through Kultura to do that. And we spend millions in the NHS training people, training all of you I suspect, in the professional know-how to do your job. We spend almost nothing training people in the improvement know-how, in getting a system of profound knowledge in how you lead people through change. We need to make that investment, and we can't just dream the money up. But how much do we spend now on clinical audit and governance and assurance and preparing for inspections and education and training, and how much of that has a real impact for patients? And I think we're encouraging organisations to piece those pots of money together to really invest in improvement capacity and capability. And then the final two domains, I think, are bits that some organisations never get onto. So on the right-hand side, developing an operating system, that's how do you embed this in the warp and weft of the way the organisation works? How do you align it with your planning and performance review? In lean terms, we talk about Hoshinkanri or catch point, policy deployment, where you cascade out the goals of the organisation and you get everybody engaged in what improvement activities can we carry out that will help deliver those big aims. And finally, you get to the point where improvement is daily work, where if you have a problem with falls on a ward, your first thought is, when can we free up a bit of time to do a driver diagram, write some aims, test out some changes, do some measurements. That's the way you end up doing your job. It takes a lot of time. It takes time to get into that way of working. But until we do, it doesn't become mainstream for the organisation. And I think we need to think about this in a way so that we have improvement work that is broad and shallow, 1,000 flowers blooming. That's important for the cultural change, getting everybody engaged. There are a few things that are narrow and deep. the really big critical things. It might be moving a mortality rate number, it might be a serious problem with infections, it might be productivity. How do we get everybody behind it and make the change happen? And finally, those support services are absolutely critical. And we always tend to think of quality improvement in terms of clinical staff, and clinical staff are really important to it. But if the way we recruit people is pulling in the wrong direction, if our management accounting systems aren't supporting whole pathway redesign, if we haven't got the informatics, the business intelligence, if the estate isn't set up in the right way, it's going to be really hard to make those improvements sustainable. So we need to think about how do we reshape those support services, and how do we engage and train the staff in those services to make improvements for themselves. So to conclude, how do we do this? It's not going to be an easy or quick journey. Developing people improving curve gives us some sense of what we might need to do. It talks about developing compassionate, inclusive and effective leadership at every level. It talks about investing in improvement knowledge, and it talks about building learning systems for continuous improvement. And the good news is that the CQC well-led framework is now asking searching questions of organisations about all of those things, and I've had more interest from finance directors and non-execs in the last 6 months because of that than ever before. We need to use it to get improvement onto the agenda. Well, these are some of the differences. These are all things I've heard said through my career. I once had a general surgeon in Bolton when we started using lean methods who put an arm around my shoulder in an avuncular kind of way, said, "The problem is, David, we're not Japanese and we don't make cars." Very astute. Clearly, if we talk Japanese to frontline staff, they're going to wonder what on earth is relevant to this. We're too busy to do this. The nurses usually say that. The managers say this improvement stuff's okay, but we've got targets to hit. The regulation requiring us to do it is something I hear, although the regulator now is. We've got lots of enthusiasm, but the board don't get it. How do I get my chief executive interested in improvement? And we don't have the skills. And then finally, sometimes even those organisations that are already on their journey, will this really be sustained? What's the chief executive goes to another conference, reads another book, there'll be another fad. And we need to tackle those, act as well as adopt, invest in effective staff time, focus our improvement onto the big goals so we make a real impact. I'm delighted to say I think regulators are beginning to reframe regulation, although that's only the start of a journey in my view. Develop CEOs and boards. You would not get to the top in GE, for example, unless you understood how you were going to use improvement methods to transform the bottom line results of your business. Build capability and stick with it for the long term. As part of a joined up system of improvement where the real energy, the real work is at the local level, but supported by organisations working together and a supported national framework. I want to finish by talking about Jim Stockdale. Have you heard of Jim Stockdale? If you've read a book by Jim Collins called Good to Great, he talks in that about the Stockdale paradox. Jim Stockdale was a Vietnam War veteran. He was captured by the Viet Cong. He spent 7 years in a prisoner of war camp in horrendous conditions. He was beaten and tortured. Many of the people he was with didn't get out. And he did get out, as you can see, and was decorated. And when asked how he got through it, he said, well, 2 things. First of all, I was a realist. I knew I wouldn't get out. I'd never escape. I wouldn't get out next week or next month. It would probably be years when the war ended. But secondly, I always believed, I never gave up believing that eventually I would get out. I had the faith. And Jim Collins, when he looked at leaders in organisations that moved from merely mediocre to outstanding, saw this honesty faith paradox. They didn't issue kind of happy press releases saying everything's marvellous when clearly the product was poor or the staff were unhappy or they had a big deficit. They were honest about the problems, but they had absolute faith that if they worked together as a team and invested in their people, they could actually transform. That honesty faith paradox, I think, is at the heart of what we need to transform the NHS. And there are some great things that give me hope that I mentioned at the very end of our document, the new the Royal College of Physicians QI Hub, the fact that NHS Improvement have written developing people improving care. And we finished with a case study of one of our AQuA members, Mid Cheshire Hospitals, a small and in many ways very challenged district general hospital, who've been at this for a while and have invested in their staff and invested in the improvement, and who are delivering some outstanding results. So I am a bit biased as a related optimist, but I think there's some calls, and I hope you do as well. Thank you.